Welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown, and I'm here with Trina Limpert, who's had an impressive career in many tech startups and major companies. Can you tell us a little bit about your career, Trina, and how you got where you're at?
Yeah, so I've been in tech for 30 years now. I kind of ha say that sometimes and go, "Wow, I'm really that old."
Not really.
But yeah, I've had a long, amazing career within the tech space. I did my computer science degree in 1996 and kind of moved in. My first kind of real job, I would say, I started out at Hill Air Force Base working on mainframes while
Wow.
I did my computer science degree. So I'd work graveyards working mainframes and then go to school during the day. I was like not a happy person during that time. Didn't sleep much, but got it done. And moved in. My first job coming out of that degree was at Novell. I got
Mhm.
hired as a network engineer, so spent some time working with enterprise clients. So like right out of the gate, I had a huge opportunity to really get visibility to a lot of different businesses,
Mhm.
anywhere from legal to healthcare to, policing, like government. I just had this amazing opportunity implementing, client server and group wise back in the day and
Mhm.
directory identity management. Just a lot of exposure to a lot of great things early on in my career. And
Mhm.
then made a shift and started doing CRM systems and implementing sales, marketing, partner management, and shifted to Oracle and sold systems for many years, and then to eBay and implemented their product organization, ran their global PMO, technology operations, resource management. My final kind of corporate, I guess, career was senior director of CX consulting at Oracle and implemented their strategic accounts organization and helped large enterprise clients like your Berkshire Hathaways and Charter
Mhm.
Communications implement enterprise software. So,
Wow.
covering 30 years in 30 seconds
Yeah.
is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But part of that as I went along is I always was very involved in community work. Got involved in different employee resource groups. I was the global president of women in IT at eBay and started developing leadership programs and coding camps for employees' daughters. And it led me down this path of starting our nonprofit called Tech Moms, where we help women now transition their careers into technology. We say tech jobs are mom jobs. They're the
Mhm.
best jobs for moms. Why are we not leaning into those opportunities? And so we do a lot of work with that. And my current full-time job my is I run a company called Rise Next. We help with AI transformation. So I've done a lot of work for business strategy and digital transformation in the past. And now with this shift to AI, a lot of
Mhm.
individuals and companies are struggling. Well, how do we actually integrate this into our day-to-day work? So we're doing employee upskilling, AI process audits, things like that. So that's really exciting work right now and having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, that's huge. That's to me the hottest niche right now is getting people to use AI in the right ways.
Yeah,
And
in the
so
right way.
yeah, and you're actually a tech person. So you started as straight tech, and then along
Hmm.
the way, you learned business, these other things. Most people, I think, today see you as kind of a business leader and nonprofit because of moms, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about that a little bit. I just saw a post from a neighbor of mine today, and it was all about praising tech moms. She was a
Ah,
stay-at-home mom, and then
yeah.
it helped her get into entrepreneurship. Is that kind of your target demographic, or most of your members like that in tech moms?
We're from all over the place. I think this is what's most amazing to me as, when we launched Tech Moms, I'm like, is anybody even going to show up? Like, I knew there was a need there. I literally had women knocking on my door and saying, Trina, I need to get a more fulfilling. I'm not fulfilled. I want to be working. How do I get into tech? Because I know that's where the opportunities are. And I would say every job's a tech job anymore. We just have not prepared our current society for the jobs that are happening. And like this now, every job's an AI job, right?
Hmm.
And so I saw this disconnect that was happening. Even for me and my leadership teams as we were hiring, I was having to hire off visas, and it paused, and I kept saying, why am I having to bring people from out of the country
Yeah.
to work in these jobs, first of all? And second, why do we have this hugely highly educated talent pool of women that we're just saying no, but not you. Like this doesn't connect for me. And realize we have this untapped talent pool we're just not utilizing.
Hmm.
How do we quickly transition those into jobs? So the only requirement you have, you don't even have to be a woman, you don't have to be a mom,
Hmm.
is a high school degree, right? And we then take you from wherever you're at, whether you're 18, we've had all the way to 77 years old,
Yeah.
in careers, returning to work. It's just wherever you're at, how can we help you make this transformation into these viable careers that now exist and we need people for, right? I think that's the other disconnect is we need
Right.
these individuals to be upskilled and participating in the workforce.
Hmm.
And so really that's where it all kind of came from and connected with my two amazing co-founders. And we run across the Wasatch Front. We're expanding now, so we really partner with higher education. So we're working with Weber State, University of Utah. We've worked with Salt Lake Community College, Mountain Tech, Utah Valley University. We're now working with USU, Utah Tech. It's being able to drive this community, and the successes that we're seeing are quick, in them now feeling like they have a community behind them to help them support them in their career, remove the barriers that are there. There's a lot more barriers for women entering than there are for men. So we really target those challenges and help them with these transformations, and help them find their fit. So whether it's an entrepreneur, like to your point with your neighbor, which I love hearing these, I hear them all the time. I love it.
That's
It's so
great. Yeah.
fulfilling to hear.
Yeah.
um, but we do have entrepreneurs. We have web developers, back-end developers, UI UX designers, technical project management, digital marketing, technical sales, QA, right? Data. We're using cybersecurity. We're finding their fit and what works for them and providing the pathway through.
That's fantastic. I love when there's whether it's a nonprofit or a business that really taps into underutilized human capital. People are our most
Hmm.
valuable resource. And so back in the day, I don't know if they still do it, but JetBlue famously used like stay-at-home people
Hmm.
to take their calls and so on. So the same sort of effort. The what are you mentioned the barriers that stop people from getting into whatever entrepreneurship or
Hmm.
tech jobs, and Tech Moms is helping with that. What are some of those barriers?
Yeah, there's a few. And I think, what the number one barrier is awareness. Um, I would say anybody listening here, tap somebody on the shoulder and say, "Hey, did you know that there's a process for getting into tech? Reach out," right? Um, Individuals don't know this is a pathway for them. And so a lot of what we do is demystify the tech industry. We've overcomplicated how we've talked about our roles. We kind of talk over people, right? Like, oh, it's this role that just I don't see myself in that because
Mhm.
we've kind of excluded from an awareness who really belongs in tech.
Mhm.
And so a lot of what we're doing is the see it, be it model. So we bring in professionals that are in industry that have made these transitions and they go, oh, well, she did it. I can do it. And
Mhm.
it's extremely powerful. It's just your own mental barrier to start with, right? And then building the confidence and the skill sets and all of it together. That's number one. Um, Other challenges are childcare. So we offer childcare for our course, a lot of our attendees, because just being able to find space and time for yourself is a challenge. We predominantly require that women do most of the domestic responsibilities. I
Mhm.
have other ideas there on that should be split maybe a little bit more, right? Give them the space to be able to learn and grow and develop themselves is really important, and being able to dedicate that time to be able to go, oh, I've got the ability to really focus on building these skill sets and putting them to use, right, and handle some of those distractions. And what's cool with that, is we see the kids are now going into tech. Like if we want to solve the K through 12 STEM issues, get the moms in tech because they're the ones that are going to drive the future of technology because they now understand and can train and teach their kids. It's a little side note that I don't think many people see that, right?
Right.
Um, but the other barriers are financial access. We do fundraising. We cover the majority of the costs through our donors and sponsors. And so do pay a small portion of their tuition, um, just because we see higher success rates when you're financially invested. And
Mhm.
so it's $400 to go through our core programs. Our deeper dive cybersecurity and data analytics are a little bit more, but not much. I mean, we just want to make it accessible for anybody to be able to get into tech careers because higher education is expensive and a lot of people can't afford it.
Mhm.
And so they just opt out. And we need to provide broader visibility and access for everybody to get into these careers, not just those that can afford it.
Mhm. So if someone joins, I assume they go to Tech Moms. Is it techmoms.com? Is that where they should find you?
Tech-moms.org.
Okay,
Yeah.
tech-moms.org makes sense.
Yeah.
So they go there and say they sign up and they take a course of study. Ultimately, they might have some vague idea of where they want to end up. What does the exit look like? Do you have partners with work at home opportunities, or how do people connect with the job opportunity afterwards?
Yeah, we have a full-time placement coordinator. We also have a resume coach, an interview coach, and we work with hundreds of tech companies nationally to be able to help place them.
Mhm.
And it's not just work from home.
Mhm.
So a lot of our individuals are looking for full-time work in office. It's it's understanding that it whatever works for that individual at that time. And tech does provide a lot more flexibility. And I think there's more work to do as far as understanding that life experience changes, right, over time. So
Mhm.
if I was a worker, like I had a lot of my team work part-time while they maybe had younger kids, so they didn't have to leave the workforce, which is a challenge for women. It's like we
Mhm.
want to say we're a family first state, but then we punish women for leaving their work, right, to
Mhm.
take care of our kids. Like it's definitely a frustration of mine.
Mhm.
Um, so if you can provide them more flexible time and then they come back and start working full time when they're able to kind of make those shifts as their kids get older and stuff. And that way they're developing their skills over time. So it's not like I'm in or I'm out. Let's provide flexible jobs that allow for fluidity throughout our lifetime is kind of what I would say based on like I had project managers that worked part-time. She was based out of Germany and
Mhm.
she would get more done in those 4 hours a day than my full-time staff. I'm telling you, just the productivity was off the charts, right? So I think sometimes we've got to make this mindset shift on what does a worker look like right now? And how are we structuring our companies to support based on where they're at within their life experience, right? So
Mhm.
I think there's opportunity both from um the individuals that are upskilling and creating ideas that like, oh yeah, I can do this and my find success and get help and you might have childcare for a period of time and that's okay. Like whatever works for you, I think it's um allowing individuals to say, let me figure out what's going to work for me and then helping support that.
Mhm. And there's some pretty helpful trends, right? That post-COVID, it's the move towards an adaptable workplace seems to be going well, to be geographically wherever you want to be, schedule your
Hmm.
time however you want to be. Have you seen things improve in terms of what companies are willing to do?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's back and forth. So we launched Tech Moms in the middle of COVID. It was a little crazy, to be honest. We were
Yeah.
doing masks and temperature checks like in person. Our, childcare would get COVID and we'd have to figure it out. And our trainers were like high risk and double masked, and
Oh,
it was a
no.
little crazy.
Yeah.
But what we found is that the timing of that was pretty incredible because it did open up an awareness of like, oh wait, remote working is a thing and it does work, right?
Hmm.
You have to change your leadership engagement and how you work with your employees. Um, and companies that really what I see happening now is like that was how we were working. Everybody was, right? Like I loved it. Like I was running Oracle at the time and I had a lot of my guys showing up with babies on their laps. I'm like, it was awesome. Like, why can't we just make that the norm? Like you have
Yeah.
everybody's helping with, parental responsibilities. Um, but what I've seen over the last year is there's been a pushback on that. Going back into in office because the leadership
Oh, right.
teams haven't quite figured out how we didn't scale up the leadership to be able to support it long term.
Hmm.
And so there's a mind, I think every company's figuring this out. I don't think everybody's gone completely back to that, but I'm seeing more people pushing back into that hybrid model.
Yeah.
What I would say for anybody that's running an organization is don't do a flat, broad policy of like either in office, out of office, or allow each leader to determine what's going to work for their team.
Hmm.
Um, because some teams do need to be in office. Some teams can be fully remote. Some can figure out this, but it's an individual one-on-one conversation that needs to happen in order to figure out what's going to work within that team. And
Hmm.
then from like our alumni and the conversations we have is if this is the job and the career you want to go to, figure out how to make sure that you're showing up how you need to for that job.
Hmm.
It may be remote, it may be in office, it may be hybrid, but figure out what's going to work for you and find the jobs that are going to support that. So I don't want anybody opting out of a job because they only want remote. Because I am seeing this pushback in the industry. Didn't all industries are kind of still figuring this out in a post-COVID world, right? Like it didn't stick, is kind of my point.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, and I've definitely seen that pushback as well. It's all over. So you've done some leadership and culture training as well.
Hmm.
If you talk to a leader of a company, a major company says, "Well, we've always done it this way," and has very traditional approach to things, what kind of advice can you give them on how to be more flexible and more accommodating to people?
Yeah, and first of all, the world's changing.
Hmm.
Like um you cannot do things the way you've been doing them uh anymore. And that has application not just for your workforce, but your speed to delivery, yeah, learning to be more agile, learning to deal with ambiguity. That is now the norm. So we're doing one of the leadership development courses that we currently are doing is because with the AI shift, it's pushing organizations in a way that they've never been pushed before, where
Right.
leadership that has not learned to deal with ambiguity or the unknowns or learn how to lead teams through that or build that type of leadership development or team management within their organizations are going to be in trouble
Hmm.
because things are moving fast. And this is, I'm going to tie in the workforce piece of it in a moment.
Okay.
Um, I call it mastering AI plus EI. So the reason I've kind of tied these two things together is what I found is let's just focus on the technology side of it for a moment. With the implementation, the shifts that are happening from an AI space, things are moving a lot faster, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unknowns. Teams aren't sure where or what to do. There's a lot of concerns in identity and security, right? You have all these challenges coming up. To be able to lead through that, the change management that's needed right now from a leadership development perspective is incredibly high. And being able to understand like how do we do that requires a leader that can be more emotionally intelligent.
Hmm.
So how do I address and talk to people about fear? It's all emotional based, right? The leading people is all about emotions. And I know people kind of like pull back, like, what? Emotion
No.
doesn't belong in the workforce, but I'm telling
No.
you, emotion is what's driving your organization when you've got people in it.
Yeah.
For now, we still have people working. So learning how to understand your own emotions, but then how to work with other people and their emotions and being able to how to create organizations that build on trust. How do I message things that we're working on? How do we get their engagement back in and providing insights, right? So that's what I'm currently really helping a lot of organizations understand. You can't just focus on the tech. You've got to bring in the people side and learn how to do that in the future. That's the new future of leadership. Okay, to answer your question on leadership. Now, where this comes into play from a people perspective, being able to lead different individuals and bringing in diverse teams is what creates what they call a super mind, right? Nothing gets done in a silo just by one person. So how do you create collaborative environments that can bring all those diverse mindsets together? And it's not about gender necessarily, it's about having organizations that can bring in this aspect of emotional intelligence. And what they're finding is that more diverse teams that have both men and women in them are able to do this better and faster. And
Mhm.
so it's going to be a critical shift that's happening, and the organizations that are recognizing that and tapping into it are the ones that are going to be more successful in dealing with this shift that's happening right now in the world. And
Mhm.
so it's a hard transition, right? Like
Mhm.
people have to get uncomfortable, right? That's what they say in leadership. You got to get uncomfortable to
Mhm.
create growth and change. And this is a hard one for people to, if you've done it the way you've always done it and you're struggling getting through that, you're going to have to move through that discomfort to move into this future of leadership style.
Absolutely. And I like the idea of innovating even in culture. So even in our small team here in tech transfer, culture is super important to us. We have a culture document that we review regularly, and we try to
Mm-hmm.
have entrepreneurial characteristics, like be experimental. In a large organization, it's even harder to do that. The In tech transfer, we always think of most innovation happens in startup companies as opposed to major companies. They just tend to
Mm-hmm.
be less adaptive. And then also, you've seen those studies where people who make it to CEO in a major company often have those dark triad personality traits, maybe not the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Mm-hmm.
overcome those sorts of institutional challenges?
You got to be open about it. This is really a fun thing that I'm working on right now. I shouldn't say thing, platform.
Hmm.
So recently, I went back to school at MIT because I'm wanting to skill up myself in AI, and the latest in leadership and learn, right. So I went back this last year and just finished up. And um, what I'm finding is that there is a need. Nobody's going to do this on their own.
Hmm.
That's what I've learned. I've been doing this a long time. There's got to be a instigation of change that's like, oh wow, if I don't do this, what's going to happen, right? Like what's going to motivate them to do that? And a lot of times it's applying to ego. Um, what type of leader do you want to be?
Hmm.
Like, do you want to be a leader that can only lead the organization of the past, or do you want to be the leader that can lead the organization of the future? And to do that, you're going to have to step through some of these really hard, challenging questions of looking self reflection, right? Now, I'm not saying some people can change and shift and some people can't, and that's okay, right? And there's some great organizations that might be run in that way, but I'm telling you, the future organizations that are going to see success are the ones that have learned how to tap into this and leverage it. One of the platforms I've been working with lately is called Workplace AI, and we do recordings of your meetings, and can look at the current sentiment of people on the call
Yeah,
and
love it.
provide live feedback, right? You can provide feedback post call saying, well, you interrupted that person 20 times in that call. You spoke 80% of the time. Did you allow anyone else to speak up, right? Like there is technology coming out that is going to allow us to be able to correct and create awareness of our own personal leadership challenges, help us to run more empathetic organizations. And I know a lot of people, when I talk about this empathy and leadership, they really get challenged because they're like, well, if I'm empathetic, I can't drive revenue. They think it as an or, not an
Conflict.
and a like, well, your clients, the way you're selling to your clients, they want relationships, they want empathy, right? They want you to be able to say, I understand your problem, I can solve it. That drives sales, that drives revenue, that is empathy. So I think there's a mindset shift in really understanding when we say emotional intelligence, we talk empathy. This is how you drive revenue.
Hmm.
This is, getting your employees to trust you is a form of empathy. It's not sympathy.
Hmm.
It's and so I think that education and so utilizing technology to drive awareness is kind of what we've been working at Rise Next, and it's been really fun to work with organizations to help them start creating these kind of mindset shifts within their
That's
culture.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And that sentiment analysis sort of technology is going to be everywhere. We have a technology here that some professors developed that they've used at the missionary training center. So if
Hmm.
you're role playing a discussion, you can see, okay, well, here's where you asked a question, they didn't respond to this, or that sort of analysis.
Hmm.
Super interesting. Can you think of any corporations that are kind of standouts who are getting all of this right now?
Um, Microsoft's a huge one,
Yeah.
right? And they really tapped in to this idea of emotional intelligence, and it's part of their culture and what they're doing and driving the future. These are required concepts within their culture and organization. And so there's a lot of companies that are doing one-off solutions in AI for customer service that are looking at body language. Can I respond? I was in a meeting just this last week with a client, and one of
Mhm.
my AI practitioners was on the call, right?
Mhm.
And this is like what I was saying. Some people can do this inherently, they can see it. So he's speaking, right? And I could see the CEO of the company kind of pull back and kind of sat back and,
Uh-huh.
did that.
Disengaged.
Yeah. And I paused and I said, I don't mean to interrupt you, but ask the CEO, I'm like, can you tell me more of where you really would like to go here? Can we create technologies? Because not everybody is watching for that. And they're just
Mhm.
kind of like, hey, I got to just get through my list of things I want to talk about, and they're not paying attention. That
Mhm.
ability to recognize engagement, tone of voice. There's AI technology out there that can determine your emotional state based on tone, not just what you're saying. It's incredible the technologies that are coming out that are starting to play into this space, and
Mhm.
companies are starting to recognize, um, you know, can I leverage that in my hiring? Right? They're using it to hire and recruit. There's AI that they're now layering on in the interview process to say what type of culture fit are they going to be,
Mhm.
not just based on their identity, right? We want to make sure we're not doing
Right,
that
right.
anymore. It's going to help remove bias in hiring.
Mhm.
Um, but how they're speaking, how they're engaging, it's starting to be recognized. And I think this is really a big shift that's happening outside of just natural language, right? Processing.
Yeah.
There's some amazing technologies that they're coming on the scene that we're really digging into from a leadership and change management perspective.
Yeah, that's so great. I love seeing those technological solutions. They really are coming. They're about here. The Before we wrap up, I want to make sure I ask you about your book. You wrote a book that I think came out last year,
Yeah.
orchestrating life work harmony. For anyone in
Yes.
business, life work harmony is going to be a challenge. What do you see as kind of the key things that professionals should focus on?
Yeah, I think it's taking time to, I call it tune in moments. I have to do this myself all the time. So orchestrating life work harmony, it's getting rid of the idea of work life balance.
Hmm.
It doesn't work, right? You can't carry everything, you can't balance everything. We got to get rid of that mindset. It's more of like, there's times where I have to pause and say, not now. Let me orchestrate back over to here, and then I'm doing this, right? And we're looking at five different things. It's your mental health. We've got to start there. Nothing's going to grow if you don't. Your relationships, making sure you're focusing on your relationships, personal life and your work, your
Hmm.
finances, your career growth, and then your personal development. You have to be orchestrating across all of those things. And so really changing that idea and stopping to go, wait, I'm not in harmony with myself right now or what's going on in my life.
Hmm.
How do I stop and start, take a moment to go, okay, where do I need to start maybe shifting some of my focus for now in order to address, right? Upskilling. Like a lot of my tech moms are like, they feel like they have to carry everything. I'm like, no, it's a not now. I'm going to focus because this is the priority, and upskilling myself to get the
Hmm.
job so that I can take care of my families better. Let's focus here. And then you can come back, and then it's like a constant orchestration and finding harmony within everything that you're doing. So it's been really fun to see both from like my alumni and my students, but also I've had a lot of executives come to me and go, that like these aha moments for them in how that they're orchestrating their own life and trying to find that harmony between running these massive companies and their personal
Right.
lives. It takes some orchestration for sure.
Right. And people feel guilty because they have to spend too much time in one area for a short time, but that's just reality sometimes, right?
It is. It
So,
absolutely is.
well, good. Well, hey, thanks so much for your insights, Trina. This has been a great discussion, and you're like a force for good in helping people get into technology and entrepreneurship. So, really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.